Today on Locked On Canadiens, the Habs season is finally over, but not without taking a couple of players again with it. We'll talk about that and some off-season mailbag questions, and that's all coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens.
Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 823 of Locked On Canadiens, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. My name is Laura Saab, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm one of your hosts. And I'm joined, as always, by Scott Matla of Habs Eyes on the Prize. The Montreal Canadiens season is finally over, but it did take a couple casualties with it.
I am also apparently already in off-season mode because I left myself muted. Yeah.
Thanks, Scott.
Look. It's nobody's perfect. I didn't know what to expect going into this game, and somehow we still ended up with potentially one of the worst possible outcomes. They lost, which cool and fine and whatnot. They lost Mike Matheson, though, which is like, of course, the last game of the year. Just literally got to get through 60 minutes and everybody can go home. And then Mike Matheson gets a non-contact injury and is out for the game. And just, what are you going to do? They lost 5-4 in regulation and admittedly played better than the Bruins, despite playing half an AHL lineup. For a game, the last game of the season, it wasn't a 10-1 blowout, but it's about as entertaining a game you could possibly ask for at the Bell Center.
So there's a couple things. I would like to know why the Boston Bruins decided to ice a normal lineup against the Montreal Canadiens in the final game of the season, heading into a playoff run where they are widely expected to be favorites. So that's one question I have for the Bruins. The other question is, was it worth it when you saw Patrice Bergeron leave the game? That's another question that I have for the Boston Bruins. And then the other one is, how could you let a rookie score on his first NHL game, on his first NHL shift? I'm very happy for Lucas Condotta. I've been impressed with him since essentially they added him to the team, to Laval very late last year. And I'm very excited for him to have gotten that goal. I'm just like, what are you doing there, Bruins? What are you doing? Why are you allowing the Montreal Canadiens to keep up with you in the last game of the season? Like, why don't you just rest your veterans? If that's how you were going to play, why don't you just rest your veterans?
This game was a wild mix of just everything that could possibly happen. Lucas Condotta on his first shift scores his first NHL goal. On his second shot, Joel Teasdale gets his first NHL point with an assist on the play. Nick Suzuki ties Cole Caufield for the team lead in goal scoring with 26. Justin Barron scored a shorthanded goal. Joel Edmondson punched a man so hard his helmet came off. And to cap everything off, Rem Pitlick set up quite possibly the dumbest possible play I've seen in my entire life. In that he comes out of the box, gets a leading feed. Jeremy Swayman is wandering into no man's land. Like if he went any further, he would have been hit by a Metro bus. Rem Pitlick goes around him, cuts to the front of the net, and he's going to just tap it in. And Rem Pitlick picks his head up and throws a pass into the slot for Michael Pezzetta, and then has to jump over Pezzetta's shot because it almost hit him. I have never in a million years seen anything as chaotic as that 10-second sequence. And I wouldn't trade it for the world because, oh my God, if it had hit Pitlick, it would have been the perfect summation of this season. But it went in, and it's good. I love that for Michael Pezzetta. Just, I do not understand what Pitlick's thought process was there, and I hope someone asks them about it. I really, truly do.
It was a wildly entertaining game, and as you pointed out, there's something about the way Michael Pezzetta plays. He always plays as if there's no tomorrow, and it's so refreshing to see. And when we saw him struggle in the beginning of the season, partly because he wasn't being played and he was losing his confidence, he was also trying to do too much. He was trying to be too many things, and I think Michael Pezzetta is best at just being Michael Pezzetta. So I do hope we continue to see him around these parts at least for a little while. And I just there were a lot of entertaining and fun things about that game. I did not win the 50-50 jackpot, which rude, rude. It was $52,000, like for the winner. It's $104,000 overall. So everybody's gonna like wish me good vibes for the coming season. I would like to win one of those 50-50s. In the meantime, I did want to talk a little bit about just the injury to Mike Matheson. It just feels like it can't get any worse than this at this point. We did say that at the end of last year, and then it did get worse. So I'm going to be very careful about what I say, but I would like to see this addressed in the off season, both in terms of conditioning assignments and especially in terms of reviewing the medical staff, the trainers, how they prepare their players for games, what kind of off ice training they're doing, what kind of off ice recovery they're doing. I really think that it is an important point. I mean, bad luck is bad luck, and there's certain injuries that you cannot avoid. Like if somebody's barreling towards you without looking where they're going and they hit you in the head with an elbow, that's very different than, tweaked things or pulled things or, things like that. So just for me, I think at the end of the year, the story of the season has not been mediocrity. It has not been being bad. It has been injuries. And yes, the Canadiens have been bad. Like don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that they were a good team this year. But the injuries just dominating the Montreal Canadiens storylines for me. And I know we're going to get into an off-season postmortem. That's happening. We'll have a season-long 3 up, 3 down on our Monday episode. We've got lots of draft content and everything coming up. But it just couldn't be a last game without somebody getting hurt. And the scoreboard apparently got hurt too.
Yeah, and the thing with Matheson's is I think there's something in the replay that his skate just caught something and it wasn't caught because where the shot was coming from was between one of those stanchions between the glass. There's some things this season that, yeah, the Canadiens medical staff were at fault for. The Sean Monahan thing, Caden Gooley coming back potentially too soon, Cole Caufield playing injured. And then there's some stuff that is just not their fault. Jake Evans getting hurt and Slavkovsky getting hurt and Arbor Xhekaj getting hurt. Some of those things are not their fault, but something in there is just not quite right that, you're rebuilding. You don't got to rush people back. We've learned that you have more AHL call-ups who are NHL ready than we thought tonight. But of course, just to put a perfect cap on everything, important piece had to get injured in the last game of the season. It truly, there's almost no more fitting way for this Canadian season to have ended than that.
Fitting way for us to end this week, though, is to do our Friday mailbag. We've got loads of listener questions, and that is all coming up in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part just needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit. Or you get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. So, Scott, really quickly, I wanted to mention before we get into the mailbag, our old friend Jay sent us a question via email, and it was about off-season potential trades and what the Canadiens can do with the Florida pick and all of that. So let us table that discussion for now, because I feel like there's enough meat in there to like create segments out of what Jay sent us. And let's get into the mailbag questions that we got on Twitter. There have been a couple. I'm going to start with our old friend Randy Hansen, whom we haven't heard from in quite some time. So hi Randy, how are you? And the question is, who deserved a game with the big team that has been passed over?
So Teasdale was at the top of my list, and he got his call up, and he made the most of it in the 2 games that he played. Didn't look out of place. Mitchell Stevens, based on the way he played down the stretch, probably deserved a game, but the Rocket tried to save as many of their core pieces as they could. And on defense, and I thought for sure he was going to get a call up at some point before the Canadiens traded for Frederic Allard, was Nicolas Baudin. And he, unfortunately, could not be called up for any of these games because he got hurt. I know, shocking. A key piece of a team in the Canadiens organization suffering a season-ending injury. Baudin definitely should have been one of those call-ups this year. I'm actually kind of surprised he didn't even get a cup of coffee. But I also understand it. It got real crowded at the time that he was healthy. Edmondson and Savard and everyone was coming back. And by the time that there was space for him, he was also out injured for a period of time. So I look forward to seeing him potentially back next year with the Rocket or with the Canadiens. He's definitely earned that opportunity at the very least. And I'll be interested to see if he can push for a, bottom pairing spot in Montreal next year.
We've got another one from Randy, and this one doesn't specify Habs, so I'm going to ask about the Habs and about in general. Favorite special event warm-up jersey of the season? So for me, if we're talking Habs, I think the Black History Month one was gorgeous. And if we're talking just in general, I thought the Canucks had a really good Pride jersey this year.
The Canucks have always done a really good job with their special jerseys. Their Lunar New Year ones are always fantastic. The Sharks do a lot of good ones with Los Tiburones for their select games there. I did love the Habs Pride jersey. It was the little bits that that the artist put into it that make that stand out. This is the first time this year, though, that none of the Rockets like specialty jerseys really stood out to me, which is a wild, wild thing. Because normally they always do like a throwback that is just top of the line, and they didn't do one this year, so I was a little bit sad about that. Their 90s jerseys were fun in like a very simplistic way, but we're just talking the Habs. I loved their Pride jerseys, and I loved what the Canucks did with their the Lunar New Year jerseys again this year, like they do every single year.
Another one, Jonathan Toews is now going to be UFA this offseason, having announced that he's not returning to the Blackhawks. Would you want Montreal to offer him a contract? Even if healthy, I would not, to be honest. Like, Jonathan Toews in the past has been one of my favorite players. But not only is he, unfortunately for his health reasons, he's not been playing at a remotely, baseline level, but also knowing what we now know about him, I personally would not want him on the Montreal Canadiens team with a lot of young prospects and players on it.
Yeah, that's a pass for me based on his health, his age at this point, and everything surrounding the whole Kyle Beach situation. Is that a team that is meant to be building a new identity for itself does not need to bring in someone who is at a center point of this. And it doesn't really make sense to bring him in. They have centerpieces right now, and they're looking to add Pierre-Luc Dubois potentially. There's no reason to need to bring in Jonathan Toews at this point. From a purely hockey standpoint, it doesn't make sense to me. And from a organizational mantra kind of standpoint, it doesn't make any sense to me either.
So we've got an anonymous one in the email. Absolutely love your podcast, especially the prospect episodes. Well, thank you so much, because we are getting a lot more of those in the coming weeks and months. My question is, what happened to the Locked On NHL Prospects podcast? The last I heard, it is on hiatus, but it will be coming back. We're just not sure when. So it's not gone. it's not gone, and hopefully it's not forgotten. There's just some logistical stuff that's being figured out at the moment. And then we've got a question. Some of these are like a little bit longer, so I think we might just flip to our next segment and address all the rest of these mailbag questions in just one moment. All right. This one is a little bit whimsical, but it still involves a lot of thinking. Our good friend, the goalie droid, since it's hot out and the season's over, what smoothie would each Habs player be? Or just the core players or your favorites would be? So, who's the banana smoothie? Because I don't know if our listeners know this, but I do not eat banana. I am allergic to banana. Even the smell of banana makes me nauseous. So, I'm essentially not able to drink most smoothies, commercial smoothies you can find at like Jamba Juice or Juga Juice or whatever it's called. I make my own with avocado.
I mean, banana makes you nauseous and doesn't make you feel good. So like, it's got to be like Joel Edmondson, right? Like, it sounds mean, but when I watch him defend sometimes, I also get nauseous and sick to my stomach and things are not going well. So and then like the green smoothie, like the one that's supposed to be helping with your brain power and all these other things is Nick Suzuki. Like, come on, and then
I'm definitely a green juice girl.
And then Cole Caufield isn't a smoothie. He's just like a frappuccino, an iced frappuccino because he is a child. Like,
or strawberries and cream frap. He's a strawberries and cream frap.
I'll take your word for it. I don't do many smoothies. Carly does, and I'm not going to go wake her up to ask about smoothies at 10:15 tonight. So
okay, who's the blueberry smoothie?
Blueberries are always like a solid, like no nonsense kind of thing. I'm trying to think of like if someone who is it. There's been so many injuries that I'm trying to think of who was
Jake
actually.
Evans.
Yeah, Jake Evans seems kind of like a blueberry ones. What would Mike Matheson be then?
Mike Matheson would be reliable. He's just like the vanilla protein shake. I think that's, it's a solid. It's not flashy.
No, it's a smoothie, not a solid.
It's like your go-to. It's got vanilla flavor and it's got protein powder in it. So that's definitely a Mike Matheson thing. I was thinking the one that like sometimes they'll make them. It's like strawberry pineapple or strawberry mango. So it's like very beautiful and like you can see like the swirly. That would be Josh Anderson
because it's very pretty to look at.
Exactly. I think we've covered them. I think we've covered what. Okay, so other than banana, what smoothie is gross?
I don't know. I don't drink smoothies. Like,
okay, I think we spent 2 minutes on smoothies. I think we're good now. We won't talk about smoothies anymore, but I hope that answers enough of your question, goalie droid, because I actually really enjoyed it, and now I'm gonna go make some smoothies. Our good friend Beth from the Happy Hour. Hi, Beth. It's been a while since we've heard from you. Okay, worlds aside, if you were Nick Suzuki and or Samuel Montembeault, where would you be flying to after locker cleanout day? The Maldives or Bora Bora?
Well, we know Samuel Montembeault is going to Worlds at this point, which good for him. Like,
but aside from Worlds,
yeah, I wanted to take a moment just to congratulate him for that. Like, that's a pretty big deal for him because he was a guy that was on the scrap heap literally last year, and now he was just a guy to fill in for the Canadiens because Carey Price was injured, and now is going to be Canada's #1 goalie at the World Championships, which I know all the good players are playing in the NHL. Shut up. It's good for Monty, and we love that for him. We love that for Snacks. I can see Nick Suzuki going to like Turks and Caicos, like anywhere warm and sunny at this point. Like spend a few days hanging out with the cat and then just packing up and going to anywhere with a white sand beach that is very far away from the island of Montreal at this point. And then Monty, obviously, despite the fact that he is going to Worlds, I'm sure he's probably I wouldn't be shocked if he was like, I went to New Zealand. Why? I don't know. Maybe he wants to go do the Hobbit tour or something, but that seems like a Montembeault kind of thing to do.
He does seem like a Hobbit tour kind of guy. Absolutely. Beth has another question for us. What are each of you looking forward to most in the off season? And it does not have to be hockey related.
This is going to sound so bad, and if our bosses are listening to this, please understand this is not a reflection of how my work ethic. I am very excited to have a couple of nights off to start going back to the gym and doing things around our apartment that like I've kind of let fall by the wayside during hockey season because I'm working so often. I'm very excited for that. And just time to decompress a little bit. I love prospect work and everything, but there's much less pressure to get as much done. There is not constantly game, cut highlights, game, podcast, edit podcast, post podcast, game. Having that time to recuperate allows me to then bring even better content to this show when there's more planning time and everything for it. I'm very excited to just have a little bit more of that free time and a lot more of our different guests too that we can bring in for this. It allows us to be a lot more creative outside of the normal structure and day-to-day of game stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm most looking forward to us being able to run our own schedule and not have it be tied to the Montreal Canadiens because an 82 game season is pretty long. When you factor in that we are going to have to do, not have to, we are going to do draft coverage. That made it sound terrible. We always have to cover the preseason. We always have to cover and like free agency. But the idea of just running our own schedule and just being able to, invite a guest whenever we can make it, and we don't have to make sure that it's not on the night for the Canadians are playing. Also being able to record before the end of the game, which a 9:30 recording is pretty late. Being able to record at like 6:30 and then like going on to live our lives is great. Or doing 2 episodes in one night, so then we get a free night. That's awesome. So that's what I'm most looking forward to in terms of the off season. That is podcast related, but not necessarily hockey related. Our friend DF Pendries, who is the most underrated player on the Rocket? I think you kind of touched on it, but please repeat.
I was gonna say Mitchell Stevens has been that guy down the stretch here for the Rocket. But in previous episodes, Joel Teasdale was there and then he got his call up. Mitchell Stevens has stepped up in there. And I think the most underrated or underappreciated player that most people don't know about right now is Pierre Dubé for the Laval Rocket. He was on an AHL contract, started with the Lions in the ECHL. He was at the rookie contest in Buffalo here, and just his tenacity kind of stuck out to me. Earned an AHL contract, and he's been so good for the Rocket when they needed people to step up here, and that he put together a really strong back half of the season. It wasn't one person dragging the Rocket into the playoff chase. It was a bunch of role-playing players stepping up when it counted most. You got big games from Dubé and from Heineman and from Stevens and then from Teasdale and then occasionally one from a guy like Riley McKay or something. It was a big effort, but Pierre Dubé, I think, is going to be my unsung hero kind of for the second half of the season for the Rocket.
DF Pendries has another question. If a Raphael Harvey Pinard shaves his mustache, will he lose all his powers?
Yes. He's always had the mustache and it's worked. So I'm not going to run the risk of that backfiring before another biggest game of the season on Friday night.
Our friend Robert Rice asks this question. We kind of touched on it yesterday, but I'm going to ask it again for a very special follow-up. Mailbag Q. With the Penguins having missed the playoffs, do we consider Ron Hextall a poor GM or an excellent double agent? So we think that it's both because he's so poor of a GM that he decided to send himself to the Penguins to ruin them as well. But the follow-up, the delightful follow-up, is our good friend Jay of Locked On Blue Jackets, our beautiful English boy, has mentioned that Pens fans now want Kyle Dubas to save them going forward. So let's hold on. Was that you or was it Jay? Because I have some thoughts.
I will let you go first before I unleash the thought that has been percolating in the back of my head here a little bit.
Okay, so if you did not listen to yesterday's episode, which how dare you, we talked about this, and one of the things that we talked about was the Leafs, and we said that the great scenario would be that if the Leafs were to bow out in the first round, this season and have Kyle Dubas's contract not extended, and have Kyle Dubas go somewhere else. And then the Leafs hire a bunch of bozos to run the team. And then they get past the first round next year, and then they sign those bozos for a long-term extension. And they believe that this bozo old school way is how to continue running a hockey team and waste the prime of Matthews, Nylander, and Marner. That's what we're going for, right? So at the same time as this hypothetical scenario is happening, now Kyle Dubas is going to a Pittsburgh Penguins team where he's going to inherit a literal mess that Ron Hextall left him with. Scott, your turn.
So here's my thought about Kyle Dubas going to Pittsburgh. Is the Penguins need likely a 1B goalie, a little bit of help on defense, and middle six forwards. They are in a position to make things happen with someone who is a little bit more. I look at what Kyle Dubas has done, acquiring guys like Mark Giordano and getting Jake McCabe, adding pieces like Noel Acciari and such to the Toronto Maple Leafs while having next to no cap space. The absolute funniest outcome out of everything is Kyle Dubas losing in the first round, Leafs lose, not renewing his contract, going to Pittsburgh, and then immediately winning multiple rounds in the playoffs because he's got Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. And I think that is by far he could go to Arizona. He could go to any damn team in the league and win a round, and it would be funny to me because every single person in Toronto will ask, why didn't that happen here? And the answer to that is simple. You are perpetually cursed for your sins against God, and this is what you have had coming to you.
Okay.
So yeah, Dubas to Pittsburgh, definitely a thing that I could see happening. Be very funny.
I would laugh. Quick question from Z, I think, on Twitter. If the Habs draft at number 5, are they locked in now, or do we still have to wait for the Arizona game?
No, they are locked in at number 5.
All right. Who do they have based on the best player available, or who do you have based on the best player available, and not discounting the Habs need in the next 2 to 3 years until they become competitive?
As of right now, well, Tankathon has us at 6, which is definitely just not correct because
it's probably just not updated.
It says the Canadiens won tonight. That's why. So that's wrong. So I, at 5th overall, one of Will Smith, Oliver Moore, or Zach Benson. I'm not opposed to any of those 3. There is the potential. David Reinbacher has been rising up a lot of boards to be Moritz Seider 2.0. We will have some prospect people on to talk about Reinbacher because I need more reassuring in that regard. But one of Smith, Benson, or Moore, and I am happy, to be quite honest.
Our nemesis has 2 questions for us. Which NHLer would be most likely to accidentally enter a middle school science fair and win?
Brendan Gallagher. Because he would take it seriously and somehow win on accident.
And he would be so rude to the kids he beat.
Well, here's the thing is, he would be tricked into doing this, like the Simpsons episode where Frank Grimes strips Homer into entering a children's science fair, but he would not realize it. And he's going to get there and be up on stage with all these kids, and just in the front row, you're just going to see like Caufield and Suzuki and everyone laughing at him. And I think that's hilarious.
Our nemesis has a follow-up question from the last mailbag. When is Laura going to watch Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World? At this point, I don't know if I want to make it a bit and never watch it just because you're going to keep asking, or if I want to watch it as soon as possible just so that I know why you care so much for me to watch this.
Anytime Will tweets you, just reply with a GIF from Master and Commander, even if it doesn't make any sense.
It's a pretty good idea, and he'll never know if I watched it or not. There we go. I'll say quotes from it. I'll look up quotes from it, and I'll just and he'll never know.
Just randomly quote Master and Commander on Twitter.
We'll just be like, yes, talk about the movie as if I've watched it and haven't watched it, and he'll never know. All right, that is it for our mailbag questions. Listen, the Montreal Canadiens season is over, but our season is never over. We are literally year-round. We do go to three episodes a week later in the summer, but right now we're still doing 5 episodes. We've got prospect and draft experts up the wazoo. And they're all coming. Every week, we'll have at least 1 or 2 episodes with draft and prospect experts. Obviously, we need to do a season postmortem with a 3 up, 3 down. We're going to talk about locker cleanout day. We're going to be following the Laval Rocket if they make the playoffs. And there's going to be so much more news off season. People are leaving, people will get signed, people will get traded for. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, so you can see our shining faces. You can find us on Twitter at LO_Canadiens. You can find us, you can email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can find Scott on Twitter at ScottMatla. You will find me at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week.